Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for your patience. Good afternoon, and thank you, everyone, for your patience. And we hope to give you a little bit of enlightenment about how 4 different people look at marketing, leveraging a market map. So I'd like to begin by introducing the panel, and starting from your right is Glenn McCandless, who is the CEO of Selling to Schools and Focus Marketing, Harris Goodman of Late Night Labs, and Harris, I believe you're one of the co-founders, is that right?
Yes.
Great. And Oliver Reiford from Pearson, and Oliver does a lot of different things at Pearson, but is working very heavily, very diligently on a program that brings together lots of companies that could potentially serve the Pearson clientele. So that's our panel, and I'd like to begin just by setting a little bit of context about how we think about a market map. And in doing that, we've done this lots of times, all of us, in different ways, and I'm sure many of you have gone through this exercise in your companies. And when you think about market, there are many, many differentiators in how you think about your market. You may be thinking about your market geographically. You're working domestically in the U.S., and you'd like to expand your market to other geographies. Or you're working in a single state or region, and you'd like to expand to others. You may be selling to a particular buyer in the food chain, whether it's in K-12 or in higher ed. We may be selling to a single buyer now, but there may be other products and expansion that you can do to that particular buyer and title. You may have a product that is of particular value in its current context, but you may be thinking about expanding that to include other product aspects or adjoining products and services. You may be looking at pricing. You may have a product that fits a particular pricing profile. And when you think about expanding and how you're going to expand your market segment, you're going to think about how your pricing fits into the products and services that you might be expanding into to make sure that they're properly aligned. You may be thinking about a user profile. In one case, you may be selling very actively into K-12, and there may be a parallel market opportunity in early childhood or in pre-K. There may be a similar opportunity on the consumer side. So when you're thinking, you might be thinking about the profile of the user, and you might be thinking about the institution type. You may be selling, for example, to community colleges and see an opportunity. How do you leverage that product by expanding into other higher ed markets? And the various uses, I think these are pretty self-evident, except we don't want this particular thing on the screen. So you may be using it for competitive intelligence. You can read these slides for yourself. There may be other reasons that you have been using, you may have been seeking information about how you look at your market in specific. Today what we're going to do is have 3 different companies explain to you how they look at the market. One being a company whose primary target is marketing, another who has developed a product for a particular market segment and has expanded from that segment, and third, a company that looks at multiple products that may fit into segments that they serve. So we'd like to start with Glenn. Glenn, would you like me to drive, or?
I'll drive.
Okay, come on up.
If you don't mind.
No, I'm happy to.
Thanks, everybody. How do I get back to my slides for
Oh, no, just hit next.
I'm sorry?
Hit next. And that's just my contact, not important. There we go.
Okay, great. Thank you. How's everybody doing? Don't you love being the speaker that gets to come on after lunch when everyone's half asleep? I don't have an answer for the one you tossed out to us, but thanks to you all for coming to the session. I think it's a really important topic. Again, my perspective is a little different from the other 2 panelists in that my job a lot of times is helping companies figure this out. I also have my own companies actually, and I have to figure it out for my own company, but I want to talk kind of from both perspectives. So I called this targeted revenue, higher profits in ed tech. Is it time to rethink the strategy? And that could be for me and you. And I feel like the old statement in Wizard of Oz, I feel like we're not in Kansas anymore. You know, the market has changed a lot. Anybody who's in this room that's at least half as old as me, which probably includes most of you, will recognize that the market continues to fragment, and it's always been important that we target carefully. It's never been more important than now, and I think we're going to continue to see this fragmentation. As you can see, the central model is kind of moving in every direction, and so getting our messaging right, getting our products right has never been more important. And I think we all understand basically that when we talk about a market segment, it's a slice of the market. Or is it really just a slice? Maybe not. Certainly, markets are like slices of a pie, and we often talk about them as demographics. That's the easy part, right? But really, we have a much more complex scenario that has to require us to be thinking more about what they really are. And I like to think about markets as people. I think it's the most important thing that we can think about. And I have to constantly remind myself when I'm thinking about growing my own business, and I have to encourage my clients to be thinking about people, not necessarily slices of a pie or a demographic. So often when I ask people, who do you sell to? They say to middle school teachers or something like that. That's a demographic, but it doesn't necessarily describe a person like you see on the screen. And so the more we can really understand what I call psychographics, and some people are familiar with that term, other people are not familiar with the term, but it's basically like the goal of this is to find the most efficient way to attract the right people with the right message through the right channels at the right time with the right price. I think I got those all right. And it's really these kinds of people, especially the lady on the bottom, who all of you are probably familiar with. And another piece of this that's especially important for us to think about in ed tech is the classic technology adoption curve. Many of you have seen this. I hope all of you have seen this and understand it. But it's an important personal profile piece because it's really a psychographic thing. The market changes as we introduce products and they go through a life cycle. And each of the people in these different stages are risk tolerance. All of you have a risk tolerance in this regard. Some of you are early adopters. You'll buy anything because you want it first. You want to be the latest and greatest with everything. And so your attitude is, I want it now. You'll pay more. You'll put up with bugs or whatever because you want the latest, coolest thing. That's a psychographic profile. That's not a demographic profile. And that profile exists in all demographic segments. So you got to be careful of that one. And then we have, of course, the mainstream users who are much more pragmatic, right? And they're people who are skeptical of new things. They won't put up with stuff that doesn't work. They're more price sensitive and all those kinds of things. We all know the pragmatists among us. I'm sure there's some in this room. Hopefully not too many, but I'm sure there's some. And then, of course, we have laggards who are happy to stick with the old way till death do they part. And then for my last thing, I just want to point out that I think we have a real breakthrough right now in the market, which is predictive analytics. Many of you are familiar with big data and that concept. Data is an important part of segmenting a market and finding your best opportunities. We've never had a tool like predictive analytics. It's really exciting technology, and it has to factor into all segmentation strategies. And that's the end of my spiel.
Thank you. And I have to say, Glenn, I've never before seen cross-dressing as mainstream. As you have. Harris, if you join us.
Hi, everyone. My name is Harris Goodman. I'm co-founder of Nite Labs, which was an online simulation science lab company focused on higher education. About 9 months ago, we were acquired by Macmillan Science and Education, so I currently still sit somewhat within the Nite Labs family as the Director of Sales and Business Development, as well as on corporate strategy for Macmillan Science and Education globally. It kind of gives me an interesting perspective coming from a startup, founding a company about 4 odd years ago, and then kind of taking it through its product life cycle, and then having it be adopted by a larger company that looks more globally at a footprint of how they develop markets and products. So I hope to be able to share, at least initially, from a startup stage, how we focus ourselves, and then how we go after a larger market. So as a startup, we're typically trying to solve a problem to begin with. Our problem that we were trying to solve was, how are people going to do online science? As online curriculum becomes more and more of a option and a necessity for many higher ed schools, we looked at higher ed also. I'll get into the reasons why, and not K-12. We said, how are people going to do science education? Are they going to get kits shipped to them? Where is the interaction of the laboratory component? And so that was the problem we went after, based upon some of our own backgrounds and expertise. We then thought about, so there was a gap in the market. We said, there's clearly a need, there's clearly a gap, whether that need exists today or it exists by the time we finish building this product. We hope they align, and we hope the timing is right. And we thought we would get it. So we managed to ride the wave a little bit ahead of the curve. Talked about our industry expertise. My background is a molecular biologist. One of my other co-founders is a back-end data modeler. So if you've ever seen the 3D simulations of the 3D models that you see of a sonogram by GE, half of those patents belong to my other co-founder. So we're pretty good at data modeling, the back end, which is what powers our products. Another piece of this, just to run through this kind of quickly, is basically competitive landscape, to understand who else is out there, what they're doing, and helping that kind of drive your decision-making process as to whether or not we want to get involved in that landscape, or if the barriers to entry are really quite expensive and are already just not appropriate for us potentially at this stage in our company. So the go-to-market strategies, that we thought of. So first of all, we wanted to validate if the market was a good fit for us. So that would come in the face of early adopters, getting feedback from them, understanding where the market was going overall. It also came into a function of, when we created our product as a startup, you try to go for the lowest hanging fruit. So I'll talk a little bit about our decision to go to higher ed versus K-12. That was a totally business revenue generated decision, because of the fact that the low hanging fruit was in higher ed. The decision-making processes were much shorter. The long-tail sales cycles that exist in K-12 do exist in higher ed, but to a lesser degree, we found. And there was a direct need that higher ed felt stronger to us than for K-12. So we were able to get sales much faster in higher ed, and that's why we focused on that area and exploited it as much as we could. And even more so, initially, I'd say 3 years ago, was a much stronger focus even on community colleges as a segmentation in the higher ed space. So we were focused on community colleges because we identified specific needs that community colleges had even over universities. Today, they're almost equal, and many of the needs that universities have as relates to budgetary constraints, space constraints, the desire to deliver online curriculum and expand beyond their borders of their classroom and deliver globally as an institution, are also similar needs to the community colleges in terms of budgetary constraints, needing to increase enrollment, managing bottleneck courses, and so on. So, this is basically what I was just talking about, K-12 decision versus higher ed. To talk now in terms of K-12 in being part of Macmillan. So an interesting thing, what was such a great fit for us, is that Macmillan actually doesn't really sell in K-12. They're a higher ed focused company. So we never really had to focus on K-12, and we still don't really focus on K-12. We do, however, have a growing demand in K-12 for products like ours, and so we are beginning to look at what does core curriculum look like, next generation science standards, and starting to develop a plan and a roadmap to make our products and future product lines appropriate for the K-12 marketplace. But like I was saying before, it's very expensive, especially as a startup where you have a limited budget, to go after a market where in K-12 there are a lot of gatekeepers, there are a lot of decision makers, there's a lot of capital in terms of, we call them foot soldiers, if you will, sales reps from some of the larger companies, ourselves included now at Macmillan, or if you're competing with another publisher, they have a lot of reps. And as a small company with a limited budget, you can't really afford to put a rep on every campus or in every state. And so we leveraged digital distribution and digital marketing campaigns to be able to reach out to faculty, to go try to find the biggest bang for our buck, going after conferences that we could attend, and trying to meet faculty at the conferences as much as we could, and leverage social media, leverage other I would say, cheaper forms and cheaper mediums of interacting with faculty to get our message out there and educate the market about our products. So in talking about product focus and how we build one, so we would talk about what's the best product to build to maximize return on the investment. So looking at addressable market sizes, we looked at when we first started building products on a platform approach of our technology, we said, so what's the number one science class that people are taking in higher ed? So the first one would be biology. The next one would be chemistry. The next one would be physics, and so on as you get down the road. And that's actually starting to change as survey courses start to come up. But that's how we looked at the market. We looked at by the enrollment sizes of the students, and we said, so we've got this platform, we've got this expertise of technology. How is our content going to fit in now, and how are we going to build content in tandem with the universities to build for the biggest addressable market to try to go after those markets? And that's why we chose first was really biology and chemistry and physics. And we started doing some other allied health related to nursing education programs as well. And that was what really drove our decision making, was understanding the technology we have, understanding the level of expertise we have, and then looking at the marketplace and saying, one is where are those gaps in the market, or we can exploit those gaps, and then understanding where are the largest opportunities for us to be able to play in. That's pretty much, I guess, my spiel, right? I think I have a few more minutes.
Yes. One point that you might address as well, Harris, is to what degree you look at the numbers of online programs in particular, not just the numbers of courses, but where the online programs are.
Sure. So that's a great point. Thank you. So when we do a market analysis of where we're looking to go into, we also first look at what are the number of online courses that are currently available in a university or in a region or in a discipline. And then we also try to do some market research, and it's really great. Some of the tools that we have available to conduct market research, like we're talking about, are amazingly powerful. I'm not trying to give shout-outs to certain products, but for instance, one like Marketo enables us to basically do what probably a team of 10, 15, 20 people would do with one person powering it and getting better analytics and understanding of our market demographic segmentation. What are they looking for? Being able to track them over a period of time. And so when we're looking at online space and we're looking at going after the online, we don't want to look at what online looks like just necessarily today. We want to look at how is the trajectory going over the next 5, 10 years, because we're not building products to sell for next year. We're looking for products to sell for the next 5, 10 years, and how we can kind of put a, if you will, even like a discount cash flow out there, basically a sales projection as to where we think those numbers will grow. So we look at the online space, and then we also think about decision-making happening on state levels that's driving online. So if you're familiar with a little bit of this, California State University system recently put out an RFP from the governor's office identifying what they call bottleneck courses. Bottleneck courses are basically every science course, because you could throw 1,000 students into a lecture hall, or 2,000 or 3,000 students, but you can't throw them into a science lab because you can only hold about 24 students. Creates a huge bottleneck in terms of increasing enrollment and staying up with the demand for the curriculums. So what do? They either have to use online and deliver more classes online, or go to blended models, which is becoming more and more popular, which makes us very happy. Because we're not trying to get rid of a wet lab. What we're trying to do is we're trying to enable students to get more time in a lab or get more exposure to science curriculum. So by doing a blended model, we're really getting the best of both worlds, because we're enabling the students to get an offline experience and the hands-on experience and out of the classroom experience in different modalities at different times. And so we see actually one of our largest growing segmentations of a market is not even necessarily online, but really blended, which we never thought we would see 2 years ago. If you asked me about blended learning, I'd be like, oh, Khan Academy, is that available yet? Is that something, flipped classrooms? But it's becoming a necessity on the higher ed side, and it's being pushed. And I think that the products that are orienting towards hybrid or blended learning, however you want to call it, there's a lot of naming, but that in-class and out-of-class educational approach and the products that can target that sector are going to be the ones that are going to really, I think, have a lot of success in the next couple of years.
Thank you. And now a little more K-12 perspective from Oliver.
Absolutely. Thanks, Farimah. Okay. Is this on? I'm gonna warn you guys. Normally when I'm in front of a microphone, I'm doing karaoke, so if I break out in song, please forgive me. This is a pretty interesting time in the education market, but also at Pearson in particular. Some of you may know or be aware that Pearson, on the one hand, is just finishing a global reorganization, which changes a lot of what we do internally. But we're also trying to sort of redefine what our purpose and our mission is with respect to the changing landscape in education, and how we therefore leverage our market map, or make best use of the footprint that we have, the resources that we have, to really be able to forward our objective of encouraging and improving lifelong learning outcomes for the customers, the students, the people that we serve. If you look at this market map, it's interesting on the one hand in that it's clearly a map from which there's a tremendous amount of leverage. Pearson has products and services that are deployed in, I believe at last count, over 70 countries, and I think very much prides itself on being a global education company, and one that's able to deliver and meet education needs kind of anytime, anywhere with any product. At the same time, I think we, as we've kind of looked internally and figured out how we best want to leverage that market map, we've come to the realization, and you guys may have seen this if you follow, information that's coming out of Pearson, that we maybe haven't done the best job of kind of unifying around a single sense of purpose and a single mission by which we can best leverage this map and figure out how to unify these products, and then again deliver a set of services, a set of products, a portfolio that best serve to meet the needs of, again, the learners that we seek to deliver to. So that's really kind of where we are. It's trying to figure out how we make use of this map that you're looking at, how we unify around a common set of purposes, and then therefore deliver more efficacious products. So I'm curious if anybody has been to efficacy.pearson.com. Okay, this is, has anybody heard about, we had one, okay, great, excellent. Has anybody heard about the efficacy initiative at Pearson?
Yes.
A few, clearly the one plus a few more. So that common sense of purpose then, the decision has been made that essentially what Pearson wants to do is really rally and mobilize around learning efficacy and ensuring that we understand, can measure, and can then sort of tailor inputs based on the outcomes and outputs of the educational products, services, and efforts that we're undertaking as a company. So our whole single focus now is being redefined around, again, the efficacy of what it is we're bringing to market, and how that single purpose then will map back into a set of products and services that meet the needs of the learners around the globe that we seek to serve. So that's a very sort of broad and high-level objective. But again, when we think today in our company about how we're going to leverage our market map, we're really trying to tie everything back to meeting that objective of delivering improved learning outcomes and understanding how we can continue to build those learning outcomes over time. Now, for those of us that are sort of on the ground and thinking about how we actually implement this, and in my case, my particular focus has been on building ecosystems around software platforms that we deliver into K-12, and thinking about what the various pieces of the puzzle are that are required today to address these different learning modalities that Harris alluded to, and that I think everybody's becoming very familiar with, so that we can, again, best meet the needs of learners and in the end hit that goal of delivering efficacious products. So on the left-hand side there, you'll see the graphics that I ripped off of Amplify's website. That's the single education solution. And then on the right-hand side, you have a delivery of efficacious learning outcomes. That was a joke, by the way. I didn't actually take that off. But the idea being that there are now a number of different components that go into the learning process. And again, these are components that address these different learning modalities. And these components range from, actually maybe building or delivering a school into a third world country that doesn't have the infrastructure to bring their students together. And that could be a school building. That could be a set of devices that you deliver or help enable for students that you're going to deliver your materials to through those devices. In a more evolved education market, it could be that school. It could be the devices. It could be the software systems that are near and dear, certainly to my heart, that power the information that then drives the learning process in the classroom. And then very, very clearly, it's going to be digital content and materials, whether that be open educational resources or our own materials or the materials of third parties that ultimately are used to drive learning in the classrooms. All these things are the right inputs. And again, for us at Pearson, it's all about getting to that right-hand side measuring these inputs and figuring out how those are affecting the outcomes of the education process that we're driving. The one other thing that I would like to suggest here, and that maybe we can get into a little bit as we start the discussion, is in my role at Pearson, I think more broadly throughout our company, we're no longer assuming that everything on the left-hand side is owned and delivered by us. At one time we may have, or we may have had visions of that. I don't necessarily know that that's the case, and I think a lot of us would argue that in order to get max leverage of our market map, we'll actually have to assume that there are a number of different players and it's sort of fitting the pieces of the puzzle together that will ultimately bring those components to bear in any given solution. And the players will not be the same from one deal to the next to the next to the next. It's going to depend on the needs and desires of the customers that we're serving, and also some of the specific economics, socio-political factors that align with that opportunity. So I think that's going to be a pretty critical aspect of our strategy as we go forward, is figuring out how we can embrace that philosophy and be willing to work to bring different puzzle pieces, if you will, together to deliver solutions. Lastly, just something for your consideration. I thought this discussion could go in any number of different directions. As we think just more broadly about a global attempt at delivery, there are a number of different factors that play into our thinking beyond our own sort of introspection. And these are things that if your company is thinking about, particular expanding from a given state that you serve, or looking to go from the U.S. to North America, or move into Europe, or developing countries, all of these factors should become sort of components that you consider before moving into that market, and at the very least something that you can tell yourself that you've considered, whether or not you actually understand them or not. Be aware that they're going to affect your ability to take product to market and ultimately to sell solutions or deliver solutions to customers in those markets. So, absolutely.
So, at this point, we'd like to just open the floor for questions, because what you're seeing are very different examples of how companies look at the market from the standpoint of product, from the standpoint of geography, from the standpoint of user, institution, etc. How many of you in this room have gone through a market mapping activity or exercise in your office? Almost all. So is anyone in the audience willing to share what their experience has been? What their process was like? Not yet. So that's okay.
That's painful, huh?
I don't know if painful is the issue, but one of the things that, one of the tools that we've used, and I'd love to know if any of you have done this, and I think it's certainly to the point of what Oliver showed in particular, is drawing a physical map. That is, by identifying the factors that you're looking for and looking to see what is tangential to that map. Anybody go through an exercise that looks like that? I saw a couple of heads nod. Would you?
So the way I've gone about it is that the proposed product or service, I kind of put in the center of the diagram, and then around it, I'll put technology vectors, market vectors, and since I'm on the export side, political, language, voltage, all of those types of things. And then we try to give them a weighting of a plus or a minus, to where then when you're done with the diagram, you can take a look at it, and if you see a massive amount of pluses, you go, okay, let's kind of go to the next step. And if you see lots of red minuses everywhere, you go, well, okay, that wasn't such a good idea, let's get back to work. And it could be a really good brainstorming exercise. I think it's better done as a brainstorming exercise with 2 or 3 people that are close to the area.
And in describing this map or diagram that you've done with the pluses and minuses for each of the vectors you described, have you found that the visualization aspect is a particular use in this activity?
I think it's really useful because you very quickly see, you can see the trends and you can see the problematic areas of the landscape or the opportunity in the landscape. That it just makes it so much easier to look at and go, okay, yep, here's our problem area that we need to focus on, or here's where I think the big opportunity is, because look, we have such a compelling advantage here.
And when you've done this, you've largely done it as a group activity?
You have 2-3 people.
And others in the room, also a group activity or individual activities assigned to a particular staff member? Quite a few have done this. Yes? No?
Yeah, group.
Mostly group?
Mostly group.
So I'm going to pose a question to the audience. What challenges do you face when you look to do a market segmentation map?
Time.
Time.
Just that, at least in my experience, it was never. It's one of those things everybody talked about doing is very important, and when it came time to actually do it, it was a group thing. It was a long meeting. No one had much fun about doing it, and then it was like done in one day and almost shoved aside. No place to reference it at moving forward.
So what you're saying is that there was an issue with I'm repeating it because of the recording. The allocation of time was always a challenge, and the lack of follow-through or using that map as an ongoing living document was a
Right.
problem?
Exactly.
Have others found that to be a problem? Beth?
It always is with strategic planning of any
Yep.
kind.
I think
Create a plan and then find a place on the shelf for it.
So taking any plan and making it live within the organization. Beth?
I think our challenge for us is to embrace or understand how totally fragmented our market is across different segments. So small nonprofits, after-school programs, in-school programs, at the district level, at the building level, word of mouth, a funder, and trying to really get an intelligent plan forward with the kind of data that we have, which is anecdotal as sales come in and as we talk to our customers.
So having access to good analytic data would be more useful. I mean, this, as Glenn referred to, and so did Oliver, and I think Harris too, the preponderance now of more data analytics. I think you also combine two aspects, and I hope the rest of you will chime in, you all have mics, is to understand that it's a two-step process. Number one is doing the segmentation, and then number two is planning the marketing against that segmentation. So I just, as a caveat, would say be mindful that there are two distinctly different activities. Mike, you had something you wanted to share.
I was going to, along the lines of what was just said, I was just going to say that availability of data and the proper granularity of data, both from your own systems and then looking at identifying proper market research that helps you to spec out the competitive presence in the various markets.
I'm curious for folks in the room, how many of you folks have products that you're looking, or services that you're looking to deliver outside of North America? Fair number. I mean, we've found, in our group in Pearson that on the one hand there is a fair amount of public data available from sources that might surprise you, although maybe now they wouldn't if you read the New York Times. But things like the CIA or the World Bank often make data publicly available that can be helpful in understanding the kind of socio-demographics of a market. The other thing that we've done, if we're admitting our sins here, is we've tended to see an opportunity and find a way to rationalize going and getting that opportunity, and then taking a step back and going, oh wow, that's a really bad market to be in, or this is not a market that over time is going to be fruitful or profitable for us. I think we all kind of fall afraid of that.
I think the challenge is sometimes you see a big opportunity and it doesn't encourage you to think more deeply about the effort that it takes to capitalize on the opportunity. Yeah.
So when you're doing this mapping, looking at the financial investment, the human effort investment is a factor that might fall into the pluses and minuses that you described in the map you described earlier. If I were to pose to each one of you on the panel, if you were to give one tip of a resource or a method or an activity that you found particularly useful, Glenn, what would you say?
Well, thanks, Farimah. I think that going back to the discussion about using visual reinforcement to the exercise, I think it's very, very useful to do that. And there's another way that complements that very well, and that is to ask people in a group exercise to tell a story that visualizes a particular sales situation and who's involved at every step of that process. Because if you actually do that, all kinds of things can come from that. Questions where you can ask, the other people can say, why? If you keep asking that one word, why, throughout the process, you will be amazed at what will be revealed. Because it's often the whys that answer the whats. So I would really encourage people to start using that why word, but again, to envision storytelling as a methodology for segmentation. It sounds counterintuitive. The other thing I would just say that I work with a lot of startups, and there's a real tendency in startups, because I actually have had one myself, that a company I took public, is that you hate to say no to anything. You're so desperate for revenue that it's counterintuitive to focus your efforts on a particular segment when it appears to be small in comparison to what you view as a huge opportunity. All of us coming into an entrepreneurial situation believe the opportunity is huge, or we wouldn't be excited about it. The problem is saying no to things. And so it's counterintuitive to think that the opportunity is to sell to a very small group. But the reality is you have to have one group of people who becomes insanely loyal to you and use that as a lever in the marketplace.
Yeah, reiterating your point. I would say from my perspective, being laser focused on one product, on one type of user, and making a product for one user that you know they can never go a day without having your product. If you build a product where you know that you're creating it and someone would never be able to, obviously it's over dramatized, I'm being a little dramatic here, but if you build a product that you know someone couldn't work without your tools or your products or your pieces that you're building, then you know you're building a successful product that can be reused and done right. The other thing I would say is, and this is with a big grain of salt, and you have to do it, well, do it right, obviously, but is user-generated feedback and always building to what, in our case, faculty, right? So always having a very strong pulse with faculty, building with faculty, because if you lose sight of who you're building products for, then you're losing touch with what your goal is, inevitably, in fixing a problem. So the laser focus on a specific problem and building a product for that problem that faculty will love and totally need is a necessity. And all along the way, working and collaborating with the faculty to help you drive that. But you have to really be focused as well. And take all the feedback in, even filtering some of it, but really taking feedback and being laser focused.
We've had maybe a more tactical suggestion. The Freedom of Information Act. You guys are probably not getting suspicious of my. But again, publicly available information, and the Freedom of Information Act is a great example of data that's in the public domain that can really help you get a good understanding of a particular market or maybe a competitive scan for opportunities that you're going against or that you have or will go against in the future. We found that to be a pretty effective tool. So, and maybe one that doesn't jump right off the top of your head.
We have a moment for one or two more questions from the audience, if you have any. Yes, Alex.
You had mentioned prospective analytics.
Predictive.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think everyone up here has alluded to data, and everyone in this room has probably heard the term big data, which is a way overused buzz phrase these days. But basically, predictive analytics is what Amazon uses to tell you that you would be interested in a book or some DVD or a music recording or whatever it is. They track your behavior and they learn everything about you, so they know what your future behavior will be. And we have a tool like Marketo was one that was mentioned, I think is an incredible tool that as a marketer that's now over 60 years old, 20, 30 years ago, I would have died to have Marketo or something like it. There are other products. You can very quickly get information that would have taken years to get. and test marketing messages, test segmentation, traction. It's really amazing. So when I say predictive, it can predict traction within segments, but it can also, once you're in the segment, predict behavior within the segment. It's a hugely valuable tool in the exercise, but also the implementation of the plan.
Marketo.
Marketo.
M-A-R-K-E-T.
That's one brand of an analytic. Infusionsoft is another one. HubSpot. I mean, there's a range of these tools available depending on what your needs are, but they're all fabulous tools.
And I'm sure if you reach out to Glenn after,
Yeah,
we'd be happy to. If anyone needs further information. Beth, did you have one last question?
No, that's okay.
Okay. Well, I think our time is up, so I hope you'll join me in thanking this excellent panel for their contribution and thanking the audience for your participation. We ended the slides but continued to record. So thank you guys. You saved my butt. So thank you both.
No problem.
My apologies.
Happy it worked out. No, it wasn't your fault.